Hello there and welcome to Mr. Iyer's Digital Dialogue. We are all about using technology to solve everyday problems. And, of course, your host is none other than Mr. Iyer himself, an expert in all things SaaS and the digital world.
Welcome to our next episode on the series The Fractionals, and today we will be talking to a Fractional Chief Operations Officer.
Thank you very much, everyone. Welcome to the third installment of the Fractionals on Mr. Iyer's Digital Dialogue. Today, we continue our exploration into the innovative nexus of technology, travel, and transformative business practices. As we progress into our new season, we are thrilled to delve deeper into the world of fractional CXOs, engaging directly with trailblazers who are redefining industry through their targeted expertise and visionary leadership. In this episode, we have the pleasure of welcoming a pioneer in the realm of fractional leadership and community creation, Karina Mikhli. As the founder of Fractionals United and right-side COO, Karina was at the forefront of Fractional COO movement before it emerged as the recognized career path. After the transition to full-time work with fractional clients, she returned to a fractional world that has undergone significant evolution. So, aside from her role in cultivating rapidly expanding community and her contribution as fractional COO and workflow consultant, Karina is passionate about reading and streamlining processes. So thank you very much, Karina. Appreciate you taking time and coming and joining on our podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, to begin with, can you share a bit about your journey before starting Fractional United? And what pivotal moments led you to where you are today?
Sure. So I'm many things. I started out many years ago as a teacher. Then I spent 2 decades in the publishing industry. When that started being disrupted by Amazon and digital, and I had one too many remarks on my
Right.
I started dipping my toes into consulting and freelance and what would now be called fractional, but then didn't have a name. I had noticed a pattern, which is small businesses would hire me to run their business. And I used to explain to people that nobody goes into business just to run the business, right? Founders either have a passion for a service or a product, or they want to, focus on strategy, relationships. They don't want to deal with the day-to-day. So as soon as they had any modicum of success, they would look for someone like me to run the business for them.
Right.
And that's a mouthful to explain. It's a lot easier to just say fractional COO.
Correct. So a lot of people, my listeners would be asking this question, or very curious to know, what is a fractional? Why do we call them fractional? And what was your inspirational behind starting Fractional United? And what gaps did you see in the market that you aim to fill?
So I'll try to answer all of those questions. So a fractional is a part-time leader. And the difference, it's not just any part-time role, it's a leadership role. So, and it's not a consulting position, because consultants are more external, right? They have a project, whether it's short-term or long-term. They don't have people reporting to them. They don't represent the company, right? They do a thing and then they leave. A fractional leader is a fully embedded leader in the team. They're just part-time. So they represent the company, they have people reporting to them. We have somebody in the community who is a fractional COO, and his team doesn't even know he's fractional, because from their perspective, he's just their COO. So the only difference between a full-time CXO and a fractional CXO is that we do other things, that we're part-time, and it's great for small businesses and startups and scale-ups that need that expertise and that level of leadership and strategic advice and et cetera that comes with experience, but can't afford a full-time leader, nor do they need one. Like, I can't tell you how many times I worked myself out of a full-time job because there wasn't enough for 40 hours. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I always said that a CXO is never 100%. He's always available. There is always room for time. Interesting. Fractional United. Can you tell me more about it? Where did that idea come into you and how did it all start? Because now it's
Yeah,
what, a 7,000 plus members close to?
8,000.
Yeah, 8,000 plus members. How did you get all of them on the community?
So, as you mentioned in the beginning, I also do workflow consulting. So I had a client, I started as a workflow consultant for them, which basically just means, I help optimize systems and tools, integrate, automate, all that kind of stuff. And I mentioned in passing to this client that I also do fractional COO work. And the next week, without discussion, she started referring to me as her COO. I'm like, okay, that's happened. Why not?
Yeah.
And then over time, because we worked together and they needed it, I would give her more and more time and started phasing out of other clients till I actually went full time with them for a short period, which happens. Like, we've had the discussion in the community. Occasionally people are willing to go full time with a client, for various reasons. And like me, we come back to fractional because after, once I put in the people and systems, again, they didn't need me full time and they were tiny and, COVID and economy, and they couldn't afford me full time. So I came back to fractional in the beginning of 2023 and discovered a very different climate than 2 years ago, which is the last time I was looking for fractional work. On the one hand, it seemed more popular, right? More people were talking about it. A lot more people wanted to become fractional. There were even a couple of media articles about it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I also discovered that it's harder and lonelier. And I know now why. I didn't know then why.
Yeah.
All I
Yeah.
knew was that it was harder and lonelier. And I knew the power of community because I had joined some wonderful operations communities during COVID. So I started looking for my fractional peeps, right? Like, where's my people? Where I don't want to do this on my own.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
And I couldn't find, like, I found pseudo communities, but I couldn't find
Yeah.
community for the sake of community like I
Yeah.
was looking. So January 7th, 2023, I had this idea. I was Googling like crazy, couldn't find it. Looked up at my husband and I'm like, is this the thing I do? Like, I don't know. Let's see if there's interest. So I quickly, just did a simple landing page, put up
Hmm.
a free Slack, messaged a bunch of my communities, put it up on LinkedIn. And by the end of that first weekend, I had over 50 members, and everybody was like, yes, please, yes, please, yes, please. And it's been like, it's been an upward trajectory since then. And from day one, I made it open to both current fractional leaders and leaders considering going fractional. And there are a lot of those. And that's in part why we've grown so much, because people hear about it, people refer others, I do outreach, and people are interested in this.
Yeah, interesting. I'll tell you, in 1 year back, when I became fractional, and I thought I took a break from my last role and I wanted to not commit full time to anybody. And I said, I rather utilize it fractionals when I became fractional. And now, in just a couple of months, I see in India, people have become fractional like crazy. People are like, everybody wants to be a fractional. So that's something. So, taking that conversation ahead, the Fractional United, how do you differentiate fractional employment from a traditional part-time work or consulting?
So we actually have a chart that is on our website that I think touches on most of the differentiation points. So one of them is I guess, longevity, right? Like how long is it intended to be? Interim is a gap. It fills a gap, right? Consulting is until there is a deliverable.
Correct.
And fractional, there is no, okay, so as a CRO, there is another fractional CRO that every time I say this argues with me that he always has like his engagements are always like 3 or 6 months. So maybe, maybe in the fractional CRO world, it's a little different, but for most fractional functions, there is no end date. It's intended to be a long-term engagement because you're just part of the team. You're just, part.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh,
Interesting you said about CROs, because when I was having a conversation with my client, he said, Mahesh, now let's go fractional for 4 5 months, and then I'll have the budgets to, take you full time. So even I have seen a lot of fractional CROs, like you rightly said, they transition into the role of a full-time CRO, because what happens is a lot of organizations, they are struggling with their go-to-market strategy. They don't have
yeah.
the right product market fit. So they don't want to invest in a CRO heavily. And so they want to go
Yeah.
fractional with them. And once they are ready for the market and the product is kicking, they really kickstart. So yeah, you rightly said. I mean, there is differentiator. I mean, a CTO or a CFO cannot be, short term. It has to be long term, because they have to look at a long term chart
Yeah.
of a CFO and a CRO. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Like for myself as a fractional COO, at some point, one of several things happens. Either they no longer need me because I've put the people and
Yeah,
systems in place,
yeah,
and I sometimes like stay on a very like low maintenance level, like 5 hour a week retainer. But sometimes they don't even need that because there's good enough people and systems in place that they're fine. Other times they need someone full time, and I don't want to be the full time, so I help replace myself. So there are variables between functions, and there are also variables between the CEOs and the companies. Like
yeah.
that's part of the fun of it,
Correct.
right? It's like
Correct.
no two positions are like, no two instances are like, and we figure out what works for us and if we want to take on that engagement and it works for us or not. um but back to your point, so actually, you know what, I'm going to pull up the chart in front of me because it's easier if I refer to it than try to remember from my memory. So give me one
Yeah,
second.
sure.
Yeah, so end date is one of them. Full time is obviously another. So fractional is not, consultant can or cannot be, an interim
Mhm.
is full time. Embedded with the team, consultant is not, fractional is, and interim is. Represents the company, consultant does not, interim does, and fractional does. And leads a team, consultant does not, interim does, and fractional does.
Very interesting. How does the transition happen? Because you bond with your team. I was talking to one of the fraction. He says I mean, he hardly speaks to the team. He does it mostly silo. Some of them do it, but there are roles where you involve with the team, and there is a transition phase. And when you know that you have to exit out of the project or you want to move out, how does that go with you? I mean, has it ever happened to you? How challenging is it, thinking, okay, now my work in this role is almost done and I'm going to move to a new role in some different organization. How does that work with you? Has it happened to you?
Yeah, it has. And it's the same as if, it happens in a full-time job, right? Like if you choose to move on, or, if you're given notice, you do the professional thing, right?
Mhm.
You come up with a transition plan, you make sure everyone has the logins and the accesses and knows how to keep going without you. And generally speaking, you make yourself available. Like I have a fractional client that I recently, a very small niche business, which unfortunately they ran out of money, right?
Mhm.
They had because of the economy, they're very niche, and it was a perfect storm. And instead of having a great holiday period, they had a very challenging one. And I was the most expensive person on the team. So I had given them enough systems and put enough things in place that, it was the thing that the company needed to have me transition up. So I worked with the CEO and everyone to make sure everyone had everything they needed. And I actually invited them into my own Slack for, a period. So if something comes up, they can ask me a quick question because I want them to succeed. Like it's not like we separated on good terms. So I will make myself available to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks.
Correct. Excellent. Excellent. So coming back to Fractional United, I mean, that's your baby. You've been building it slowly and it's been growing really well. Is there any specific problem Fractional United is, trying to solve or aiming to solve for the fractional employment or for the fractional community?
So I'm not trying to be everything for fractionals, right? The one thing I'm trying to be is the community, right?
Mm,
Since we are this weird, like we're not like we're employees, but we're also we're not in the US, we're mostly
mm,
1099, not W2, so we're not like full-time employees. So it's this weird, and most of us work remotely. So we don't have that water cooler. We don't feel, like we don't have each other. So I'm trying to be the place where we can connect, collaborate, and learn from each other. Like that is my one mission, right? To be the community for current and aspiring fractionals. And instead of trying to be everything for everyone, like I don't want to be a matchmaker. I don't want to be, an educator. I don't want to offer benefits. So instead of trying to do all of that, I partner with others in the fractional ecosystem that do that. So we have a partnership with John Arms and Voyager U, who's been doing a fractional boot camp forever. And he's actually been a fractional ally longer than I have, and he has this wonderful thing. So why reinvent it? Instead, I partner with him, right?
sure.
I found, partners to offer benefits both in the US and non-US for for fractionals and et cetera, et cetera. So my focus is the community.
Excellent. So extending to your community stuff, what is there been a success story? Somebody has come up and told you, Karina, because of since you created this community, I got a couple of clients, they have reached out to me and they have, has that happened to you? Any success story like that you had?
So one thing I do tell people is like we do have like job channels, but I can't guarantee jobs, right? Like that is
Yeah,
not our focus.
exactly.
The best way to find work now, because it's still so hard, is who you know. And you have 8,000 people you can develop relationships with, right? So
Exactly.
if you come at it from like getting to know people and connecting and developing relationships, referrals do happen. Like people have definitely created referral networks, people have definitely created connections. And we actually have a shared wins channel, which I love to read because people do,
Yeah,
go back there and like
nice.
share stories. Like there was one recently where someone met someone through the community, and it led to something wonderful. So absolutely, it does work if you approach it from a win-win and let's get to know people. There are a few people who unfortunately are just like job, 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 and it's not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about networking, actually. If you
Yeah,
network well, because that's how you build business.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
from the business perspective, if a CEO is considering hiring a fractional executive, what advice would you give them to ensure a successful partnership?
So a couple of things. First of all, treat this as a two-way interview. I don't actually do proposals or pitches. To me, this is an interview, right? Like any other interview. And I interview the CEO as much as they interview me. So you want to make sure the person has the experience you're looking for. You also want to make sure that you connect, and trust the person. Like,
Mm.
does your communication style mesh? Does your working style mesh? Is this someone you will trust to do the work? Because if not, don't bother, right? Like, you're hiring a leader. You don't want to
Correct.
hire someone and then get in their way and micromanage. Like, there is
Correct.
no
Exactly.
point. So make sure this is someone you can trust to do the work. And the great thing about hiring a fractional, like, I know like the rules are different in India and whatever, but in the US, because it's 1099, there is no long-term commitment. You can try it. I would say give the person enough chance. Like, don't give them a week and be like, no, this is not working.
Yeah,
Give
exactly.
them a month or two to actually settle in and make a difference. But if you see it's 3 months, 4 months, and it's not working, have a conversation. If it's still not working, part ways and try again. But it's
Correct.
like any other like interview or job, like it's a two-way conversation. You have to like make sure it works. And if your first try doesn't work, in the early days of the community, people were like, oh, but like if somebody has a bad experience, they won't try again. It's going to give fractionals a bad name. And I'm like, if someone hires a COO and makes a mistake, they're not going to stop and not hire another
Yeah,
COO.
yeah,
It makes no sense. You made a bad mistake. We all make mistakes. So you
exactly.
again.
Very interesting because at the end of the day, you're hiring somebody just that the number of work hours is less. Everything else remains the same.
Yeah,
So I don't see
yeah,
any difference why it should be treated differently. Yeah. So
exactly.
since when you started Fractional United, how has the concept of fractional employment evolved and what are the trends you are observing? Because I see a lot of changes happening in fractionals too.
So it is slowly, too slowly, um, continuing to become more popular. Unfortunately, it's still more on the supply side than the demand side, and that's part of the problem. It is that hard to find the work because there's way more supply than demand. And I would say a tiny fraction, haha, of the people who need us know we even exist.
Correct.
I actually created a site, fractionaldefine.com, that anyone is, welcome to use to help educate and spread awareness. And I tell everyone in the community, like, we need to talk about it to everyone. And I also, you know, post and try to correct people who confuse it, because
Mhm.
if we are not consistent in how we use it, this movement is never going to take off, right? Because if we ourselves and if when we explain it to people, we conflate it with consulting and further confuse the matter, it's never going to take off. So we need to
Correct.
clearly understand the value of fractional and talk to everyone about it and help spread awareness. And
Exactly.
eventually there will be that inflection point and it will get easier. And I
Correct.
truly believe it will at some point. I don't know when, whether it'll be 5 years or 3 years or 10 years, but I do believe that at some point this will be the default for like SMB startups and scale ups, because it
Yeah.
makes so much sense.
Exactly. Exactly. Especially startups. I keep talking to startup CEOs and they don't have budgets. They say we are bootstrapped, we don't have money, we don't want to invest in a very high-end resource. Uh, yeah, you can hire a fractional, he can work 40 hours a month for you, and that's I think so good enough for you to kickstart your product and get things rolling. So yeah, it's I see a lot of progress and growth here. And as I said, you've been doing an amazing job with Fractional United. Uh, Hence, I want to touch that question. What are the leadership principles do you adhere to when managing a community, such a big community, and a platform as unique as Fractional United?
So this is my first time running a community. So it's been a steep learning curve. But I do have to say that, So in the beginning, I reached out to a bunch of the community leaders that I belong to try to like absorb as much best practices and information. But I do have to say that being a leader has made it easier because community, similar to leadership, is this fine line of listening, supporting, but also knowing when to say no.
No, yeah.
Um, like on the one hand, I have more bosses than anyone else does because every member has a say. And I do
Correct.
try to listen to patterns and needs, but
Correct.
I also have the bigger picture that no one member does. And I don't always do what everyone wants because I have a mission and vision for the community that I will adhere to. So it's an interesting fine line, but I think being a leader made it a lot easier than it would have been otherwise because you do this as a leader.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you balance then? Yeah, because you have your clients, which is your bread and butter. I'm sure Fractional United is more of community services. I'm sure you might monetize at some point of time. So how do you balance your time? Because last time when I spoke to you, you told me, Mahesh, I have such a stacked calendar. Just check where you can find the slots. How do you manage that? How do you balance that?
Time blocking. Literally, I have time blocks on my calendar for like, the different clients or the different work I do. And then I have like SavvyCal, different links, like
Hmm.
one for the client that makes available their time block. And it's
Yes.
just time management, but it's challenging, and as any leader knows, things never go on plan, right? So, I could have a perfect plan with time blocks and then something happens and everything's like, thrown out the window because there's a fire I have to put out or something. So it's luckily I have a great team at Fractionals United. It's not me myself doing it alone. And a lot of automation behind the scenes helping to. And, I keep tweaking my time blocks and tweaking and learning.
Great. So I have one last question. Probably, it's what's the key piece of advice would you offer to professionals considering transitioning to a fractional role? Somebody who is moving from a full-time role and who's interested in going into fractional. What is the piece of advice you would give?
Give yourself a leeway. Like, if you can do this while you're still employed, do it because it's going to take a long time.
Mm.
And you don't want to, like, obviously, if you have a choice, it's different. But it's going to take time. Uh, because the only way to find the work now is through networking, like we
Yes.
discussed. So you want to have you want to give yourself a runway. And, if you're still employed, start putting out feelers and making the relationships while you're employed. If you've been unfortunately let go and have no choice, take other work while you
Yeah.
keep looking. You don't only have to do fractional work. I do consulting work. You can do more than one thing because it is unfortunately going to take time. So give
Yeah.
yourself that runway.
Okay, brilliant. I think so. My audience will definitely must have taken a lot of learnings from this. And Karina, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking time, spending time with us from a busy schedule. And very soon we will have the recording up and running, and I'll share it with you. It is across all platforms. So once again, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap on this episode of Mr. Iyer's Digital Dialogue. Before we close out today's episode, a quick reminder to all our listeners. If you found value in today's insights and discussions, be sure to subscribe to Mr. Iyer's Digital Dialogue on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other leading podcast platforms. By subscribing, you'll stay updated with the latest episodes and continue to delve deep into the ever-evolving world of digital dynamics with Mr. Iyer. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to having you join us for our next episode. Until then, keep the dialogue going and keep pushing the boundaries of digital innovation. Farewell, and stay curious.